Hi, hey, hello, how y'all doing? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Gunny Valentine, or Gunny for short, and I'm currently working on bringing the Casull from Hellsing to the real world. In this video, since it's my first official one on the recreation of the Casull, I figured I'd start with the basics, giving some background information on the gun, as well as some real-world design cues that will be taken into account for how I'm going to attempt to make the real deal. So anyway, let's get started. For reference, I'm going to be using the Hellsing wiki as the main source for most of the information about the Casull that I can gather. And even though there isn't a ton of specific info, it does give some helpful insight with a few specific measurements that I can work with when designing the rest of the gun. Let's start by looking at some numbers. I will note that there are separate numbers given for a couple of measurements throughout the website, but I will clarify as to why I'm going to be using the values I picked later. According to the wiki, the Casull comes in an overall length of 39 centimeters, around 15.4 inches. However, you can see here that the length is quoted at 33.5 centimeters, or around 13.2 inches, which is a pretty substantial difference of a little over 2 inches. We can see from clips of the anime that on the slide itself it says that the barrel length is 10 inches. If we go with the first length of 15.4, that leaves the remaining length behind the barrel at 5.4 inches. Looking up the length of a standard 454 Casull cartridge tells us that it comes in at 1.77 inches in length, which means that the 5.4 inches minus 1.77 comes out to 3.63 remaining for things like the trigger mechanism behind the magazine. If we go with the second value of 13.2 inches, this leaves us with an excess of 3.2. 3.2 minus 1.77 gives us around 1.43 left over. Given these two values, I will go with the latter of 13.2 inches for a couple of reasons. First, the remaining length of 5.4 is way too much excess material that is needless in the functionality of the gun and adds a longer slide, which would also require a longer sliding action. Sorry there, I just want to interject this bit real quick. This is being made post-edit. I want to go ahead and clarify a point that I also forgot to add why I'm going with the 13.2 inch length over the 15.4 inch, and that is specifically for the proportions, because the length of the barrel being 10 inches is a hard number that I'm having to work off with. If you go with the longer overall length, the extra 5 inches of length behind the 10 inches of barrel just doesn't proportion right. It puts the barrel sitting a lot more forward versus how it should look in proportion to the actual clips from the anime and whatnot. So, it just makes a lot more sense to have the 13.2 inch for the overall length, because the proportions look a lot better. Like, if you hold up references and stuff on images, it just looks out of place if it had such a long extended overall length. Because you'd have something with a lot of overhang over the back, kind of something like the Kel-Tec CP33, which just has that big part that sticks behind. And I don't want it to look like that. I just want it to look as close to the original source material as I can make it, while still keeping, all the references as accurate as I can make them. But this might be something that, even though the 15 inches might be technically it's given, the 13.2 is just more accurate to the proportions and the styling of the gun, making it look proper. So, the Casull, on the other hand, doesn't have this problem. I'm going to be able to get away with a lot more leniency on that, if that ever comes to fruition, but that's, for something later down the road. But anyway, I just wanted to put this in there. Sorry, and continue back with the regularly scheduled video. The second reason being a personal assumption being made that when the design of the Casull was being drawn up from the original creator, when they were determining the length of the barrel, they measured it from the end of the barrel to the inside of the barrel at the front of the chamber, when in actuality, when measuring a semi-auto barrel length, it is measured from the front of the barrel to the breech face, or where the back of the barrel meets the front of the slide, where the firing pin would protrude from. If it was measured this way, it would add unnecessary length to the barrel and wouldn't be a true 10-inch barrel. It would be more like an 11.77-inch barrel. And I know they say longer is better, but in the case of accuracy to the source material and sticking to the 10 inch as the gun says it has, going with the shorter 13.2-inch length makes much more sense in the long run. One last thing in terms of the length note is that these numbers are not specified that they are for when the gun is locked back or not, although it can be assumed that it is in reference to when the pistol is locked in the battery. If this is the case, however, the 15.4-inch length of the pistol when it is fully locked back would mean that the pistol length when closed and in battery would come out close to that 13.2-inch length, which might just be a coincidence, but means I could technically get away with using both measurements, but for different things. This is definitely realistic in a design sense, so we shouldn't have any major issues there. Next is the weight. Here there's another issue in the consistency, given that we are provided two distinct weight values as well. However, they don't have as much of a major impact as the length does. According to the section here, the weight of the Casull comes in at a staggering 6 kilograms, or around 13.2 pounds. However, you'll notice here that it says that the weight is around 4 kilograms, or a little under 9 pounds. I will also note that both of these are unloaded weights, This is a very wide disparity between the two estimates. However, from other online sources quoting the 6 kilogram weight over the 4, I'm going to go with the former rather than the latter for the official weight. And we'll tell you also this is excessively heavy for a handgun. For reference, a standard 1911 pistol weighs around 2.5 pounds unloaded, so the Casull has an overall weight of over 5 unloaded 1911s, or about 2 unloaded AR-15s, going with that first 6 kilogram weight. Is this possible in real life? Yeah, the gun will most likely function without any major issues, but the weight would just be uncomfortable to handle after a while, so I might take the creative liberty in making it somewhat lighter. However, that's still on the table. Overall, the weight for the most part will be determined by the materials used and the final product size, so it's not particularly a priority at the moment. Now let's talk about the functionality, how this thing works. To answer that, we continue with the wiki to learn some very interesting information. One note being the acknowledgement of the use of the Browning short recoil action in the function of the Casull. For those of you not familiar with this, it basically comes down to the idea that the firing of the pistol uses the energy of the shot round to cause the barrel to move slightly to unlock the barrel from the slide and allow it to cycle and reload a new round automatically. Forgotten Weapons has a great video detailing the specifics of the short recoil operating system for those of you that want to have more information on that. This is the most common form of locking mechanism in most semi-automatic handguns and can be easily implemented in a real-world use case, seeing that it's, like I previously stated, very commonly used. The wiki also denotes that upon analyzing some close-up shots of the Casull that the hammer never fully cocks back, which is the telltale sign of a double action mechanism, or more notably, a fast action mechanism, specifically pointing to the Daewoo DP51, although it's not really shown in the anime the use of a fast action mechanism specifically, so I'll assume it uses a fairly standard single/double action like that of the Beretta 92, since Alucard Cannon does clearly cock the hammer back manually like a single action throughout the series, but fires with the hammer down as well. Lastly, after numerical and mechanical references, let's move on to visual cues. From looking at it, it's clearly obvious that the overall design is very much inspired by the Colt 1911. However, personally, I noticed that their slenderness and general shape of the grip is more in line with the stylings of the Beretta series of handguns. Note here the curve at the back of the grip and its similarity to that of the Beretta 92 FS. The wiki also notes that the gun is modeled after certain aspects of the Colt M1903 and 1905 series of handguns, which after comparing them is noticeable. The wiki also points that there are some similarities to the AMT Automag 3, which is definitely understandable given the extended length of the slide since the Automag was chambered in the fairly long 30 carbine cartridge. The final thing to note here would be the use of a titanium nitride barrel, as can be seen by the distinct gold coloring, which is pretty cool as well. This might seem like an overload of information I just threw at you, but it is all important when it comes to the design of the Casull. As for the next stage, I'm going to be going over the 3D design I've made up in Fusion 360 and work on the first official physical prototype in the form of a 3D printed model. This will help give an idea of how the gun's going to feel in the real world in terms of how well it fits in my hand and if the dimensions are both realistic and practical. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more, consider subscribing and staying up to date as I continue on the progress of bringing the gun to the real world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.